Hello out there, you wonderful people. This is Andre, the Game Idea Guy. Thank you once again for lending me your time and your ear listening into another Gamer's Thoughts discussion. In this one, I'm going to try to keep it as brief as possible because it's not something that needs to be a long winded conversation, even though it really could. But why do people want the Nintendo Switch to be 8th generation versus ninth generation? Because I know what I've heard many times over from people that I've disagreed with saying, well, you just want the Switch to be ninth generation so that Nintendo wins the generation over Sony and Microsoft. Which, okay, I can understand where that argument comes from, but if you make the Switch 8th generation, and that means that Nintendo wins the generation over Sony and Microsoft one way or another. Because you can't say that the PS4 wins Sony the generation if you include the Switch in that generation, because then you're including it along with the Wii U and the 3DS. And even though the Wii U didn't sell gangbusters, the 3DS sold decently enough that combining them now is close to almost 200 million pieces of hardware, which the PS4 is not near. And the Vita definitely didn't get up that far. I think the Vita was around 15 million. It barely did better than the Wii U, which is a travesty, to be honest. Individual handhelds like that should always sell better than their home console counterparts. I'm sorry. They should, because they're meant for the individual experience. But that aside, it's a dumb point to make when the counterpoint to what you're saying is still almost exactly the same result. It's just in a different time frame. Again, this is just me thinking it out. Now, and I just found this out recently that the Nintendo Wii U was actually still receiving games. I mean, maybe not as frequently, but there were still games coming out for the Wii U up until December of 2021. That's 5 years after it was basically determined that it was going off the market. You could still get games on there. And a lot of people don't know that, but that's another discussion for a separate time. But it's just like, it just doesn't make sense. It's the successor to the Wii U. So why would it be in the same generation as the Wii U? And then people will say, well, it's Nintendo's 8th generation handheld, which wouldn't make any damn sense either, because the 3DS was that. You can't just erase the 3DS from history. It was there. It was Nintendo's 8th gen handheld. So even if you wanted to skip it being a successor to the home platform, if it's a successor to the handheld platform, that makes it even more cemented that is a ninth generation console. I personally consider it to be the successful successor to both of them because it's a hybrid. It combines home and handheld as a thing. That's why it can't be necessarily as powerful as everything else out on the market, because it still has to operate as a handheld. So it's like the arguments that I've heard people make and seen people make just don't make sense to me. It just doesn't. Because again, you can't say Sony won 8th generation if you include the Switch in it. You couldn't do that within the first 2 years after the Switch came out. You literally couldn't. And then to think that the Switch may outsell the PS4 platform as a total, and it came into the generation very late. Who does that look bad for? That doesn't look bad for Nintendo. That looks bad for Sony. So again, this is another argument that just legitimately doesn't make any sense to me. Because I try to go over these things because it's like, I think they're stupid in the immediate. But then, even if I give myself the time to actually think about the things and think into them, then it just seems even dumber. So it's like, are the people saying these things really thinking these things out. Now, the best argument I have heard someone make is that the Switch was selling alongside the PS4 and the Xbox One. Problem with that argument now is that the Switch is selling alongside the PS5 and the Xbox Series platforms. So what difference does it make at this point? And Nintendo has had a general amount of consistency between 4 to 6 years before they move to a new generation. Now the Wii was a major outlier to that because it was 7 years, and also the 3DS because that was 8 years. But those are the only outliers. It's not consistent with what they've been doing. I mean, you could consider the Game Boy an outlier because of the multiple forms it took, because it went from the Game Boy to the Game Boy Pocket and the Game Boy Color. So those different iterations extended the life of the Game Boy across multiple platform, across with multiple home platforms. But still, it just looking at it wholesale for what it is. Nintendo refreshes every 4 to 5 years, and maybe they can make an extension to 7. Actually, the Switch may be one of their bigger outliers if it does make it as far as I think it might. I honestly think that Nintendo probably isn't going to release a successor until about 2024. Especially if they have a bunch more games lined up for the Switch that we don't even know about. And with all the stuff that they're going to be coming out with within this year alone, there's a lot that you could look at and be like, yeah, they're coming with an onslaught of stuff. I mean, that doesn't mean that some stuff wouldn't be cross-platform between the Switch and whatever its successor is going to be. But it's just one of those things to think about. Like, why are people so hell bent on this being an 8th generation platform? And most people look to the graphics. I'm like, I guess y'all don't really see too well. I mean, let's be honest. Like, yeah, PS5 and Xbox Series games look better than Xbox One and PS4, but they're not leaps and bounds better. They really aren't. You're getting higher resolutions and sharper quality textures as long as you don't use ray tracing. You use ray tracing, that means that while people may not understand this, those games are running at lower resolutions on ray tracing. They are not running 4K. I can tell you this right now. They're not running 4K and ray tracing at the same time. The game's resolution is lowering. Most people probably won't notice it because even though they're playing on 4K televisions, the television is doing some upscaling in and of itself. And I'm very certain at some point that's going to come out. Call it a hunch. I have a very strong suspicion that that's going to come out. And I guess it's also that people assume that because the Switch isn't doing ray tracing, that it couldn't. Um, Honestly, most game consoles, even back during the PS1 era, could have done ray tracing. It would have drastically slowed down performance and wouldn't have been sustainable for long-term gameplay. That's why the ray tracing we have today is only partial ray tracing and not full-on ray tracing, because that would require that they severely nerf the the resolution of the games that you're playing. That's something that nobody can avoid. So it's not even true ray tracing. It's like some partial version of it that is kind of a blend of ray tracing and rasterization. I know because I've been doing research on this type of shit because I'm curious. So I've after having videos pop up, I think it was the Science that did one that explained it out very well. That I mean, Shadow Fox has talked about this a lot. That people ignored him on. But then after that, I also went into just looking into some stuff and just doing some research on things. And I am really leaning towards, hey, the ray tracing that you guys are getting is still hitting those systems with performance issues. That's why you can't do 4K 60 frames per second in some games because the ray tracing that is in there is cutting the performance. Or if they are doing ray tracing, then they're cutting down the resolutions on the games so that you can still keep the performance in place. But you're not getting all of that all together at once. That's just not happening. And Nintendo probably looked at it as like, well, the technology is still not up to par where we can use it on a regular basis, that it won't handicap our games. And I don't blame them for that. Why take the time to put that in there and it's going to handicap your games in any way, shape, or form? I would not do it. Just it doesn't make sense to do. So going back to the Switch being ninth generation, as I have said multiple times, it's based upon time. It being the successor to the Wii U or the 3DS, if you really want to make it a big deal about it being a handheld, still puts it in the ninth generation. There's no two ways about it. It still places it there. So you can either say it's the successor to the Wii U and therefore it's the ninth generation, or it's the successor to the 3DS, therefore it's the ninth generation. Because I swear people try to forget the fact that the 3DS was actually the platform that started the eighth generation. It was a handheld that started the eighth generation, and then another handheld that followed it before home consoles even hit the market for the eighth generation. That's how it worked. But again, people want to pretend. So I guess that's on me for taking notice. Andre, why are you paying attention to that? Nobody pays attention to that, even if it's true. But I don't want to drag this on too much. If anybody has anything that they would like to say or add, please do. I'm definitely willing to hear you out. If you have an argument that counters any of my arguments, I would love to hear them because I want to hear, at least if somebody's going to have a counter argument to what I'm saying, I want it to be something that's easily understandable or something that easily makes sense. Besides the stuff that is superficial that can easily be debunked with rationality and logic. That stated, if anybody, I don't know, I had something else I was going to say, screw it, drop it, I forgot about it. But there is one other thing that I wanted to talk about, and that is the I Got Mine movement that Brother Sandstorm McDowell decided to go ahead and push with for the coming last year of the Wii U eShop and the 3DS eShop being on us, because everybody has a year to go through and purchase the games that they want from the eShop, and then those are forever gone from purchasability, and whatever you have is still locked to your account. You can still download it again at any point whatsoever, as long as you have a Wii U or 3DS. So I will be doing some videos specifically about the Wii U, and I will be using that hashtag to support what he's doing. If anybody else is interested and you want to talk about the Wii U or show off some Wii U games and gameplay footage, utilize the hashtag I Got Mine in your discussions or footage. It's all you got to do. And potentially, if you'd like them shared out, you can always share it to me on Twitter, and I will definitely reshare it or retweet it for other people to be able to see. That said, I'm done with the conversation. Thank you guys very much for listening, and keep your eyes and ears out for more stuff from me. And until the next time, enjoy your games, and everybody, peace out.